Hello, my name is Joshua Chang, and today I'll be walking you through what you have to know in order to ace the AP Language and Composition exam. This exam is one of the two AP English exams you can take, the other being AP English Literature. While AP Literature focuses more on thematic and literary analyses of longer texts, the AP Language exam tends to focus more on rhetorical analysis, the actual argumentation of your essays, and general language skills that build a foundation for persuasive writing. Now, before getting into the content of the course, let's do a quick breakdown of the exam itself. The test is a 3-hour and 15-minute test consisting of 45 multiple choice questions and 3 free response questions. You will have 60 minutes to solve all 45 MCQ questions. Then, after a 10-minute break, you'll be given 2 hours and 15 minutes to answer 3 separate free response questions. Taking a look into the MCQs, you will be presented with 5 passages, 2 reading passages and 3 writing passages. Reading passages will ask you questions requiring an understanding of things such as the purpose behind the rhetorical choices the author makes, or simply the content of the article itself. Essentially, in these reading passages, you'll be asked to analyze what the author is trying to convey and how the author conveys this message. The writing passages are typically easier than the reading passages for most students, and it's mostly because it simply asks questions regarding the adherence to certain grammatical rules and the organization of sentences within the passage. Now, moving on to the FRQs of this exam, you'll be required to write 3 different types of essays: a synthesis essay, a rhetorical analysis essay, and an argumentative essay. You'll have 2 hours and 15 minutes, and you can freely use this time to write the essays in whatever order you please and distribute the allotted time in any way you like. But there is a suggested time distribution that the College Board recommends. Starting with the synthesis essay, you'll have a suggested time of 55 minutes and be given 6 different sources to incorporate into your writing as evidence. This isn't explicitly stated on the exam, but it's understood that 4 of the 6 sources will be text-based pieces of evidence, such as an excerpt from a news article or a blog posted online. And the remaining 2 sources will be some sort of visual illustration. One of these illustrations will almost always be a table or graph depicting some sort of statistical evidence. And the other can also be a table or graph, or it could be something completely different, such as a satirical comic commenting on the issue presented in the prompt. After reading all 6 sources, you will have to use at least 3 of these sources in your essay as evidence to support your position. The prompts of these synthesis essays can be generally divided into 2 categories: argumentative and explanatory. The argumentative synthesis essays will ask you to take a side on a debate and use the given sources to support your chosen claim. And the explanatory synthesis essays will often ask for you to analyze the facts presented in a case and pick out and explain the most important factor when doing something that the prompt states. The second essay in this section is the rhetorical analysis essay. The suggested time for this essay is 40 minutes, and in this portion of the FRQ section, you'll be given one passage similar to those seen in the MCQ section and asked to rhetorically analyze the author's style of writing or speech. In the prompt, you will typically receive a little blurb of context that must be used in your analysis if you want to score highly on this portion of the exam. This is because in that little blurb is crucial information, or at least hints, about the rhetorical situation of the author. The rhetorical situation is everything when it comes to rhetorical analysis, which is why it has to be mentioned throughout the essay to get a respectable analysis score. Then, finally, you have the argumentative essay, which is the third and final question of the AP language exam. The suggested time is again 40 minutes, and the most identifying characteristic of the argumentative essay is that you'll be required to use your own personal knowledge regarding the prompt as evidence to support your claim. The use of personal evidence in this portion of the exam ultimately means that you need a vast and diverse archive of evidence already in your mind before you enter that testing center. The prompts for this essay are largely split into 2 types: statements and stances. Statement prompts will give you a quote or statement that someone has said in the past, and you will be asked to what extent do you agree with the given claim. Stance prompts, on the other hand, will simply ask for your stance or opinion on a matter, and all you have to do is answer and support that answer to the best of your ability. Now, to recap, you first got the MCQs that consist of 45 questions for a duration of 60 minutes, and then your 3 different essay prompts for 2 hours and 15 minutes with a 10-minute break in between before you start the essays. Here, you should note that the MCQs will make up 45% of your total raw AP score, and the 3 essays combined, which are each graded out of a total score of 6, will consist of the remaining 55% of your total score. Now that you have an understanding of what to expect in this AP curriculum and what skills are required to ace this test, let's get into the actual content of this curriculum. First, we'll start our course with MCQs, specifically the reading MCQ. Before we get into a practice question, here are some tips on what to do when reading and solving these questions. First, I want you to create a mental framework of the passage as you read. This means don't get overwhelmed trying to memorize every single little detail you read. Just note as you move on from paragraph to paragraph the main ideas and the purpose or function of each paragraph. You should also note as you read shifts present in the passage. This can be shifts regarding the tone of voice, a main idea, or the setting in which events take place. Having your reading organized in your head through the use of this simple mental framework before moving on to questions will make answering them much more efficient in the long run. The second tip is to simply start annotating. We are human, we forget, and even if we create a good mental framework, we will inevitably forget certain pieces of information and have to reread. So as you create the framework in your mind, jot them down on the side of the passage and have identifiable markers that you can come back to when answering questions or looking for specific pieces of information. I think we're now ready to jump into some practice. So on screen, I have a sample MCQ passage, and I want you to pause the video and take a couple minutes to read the passage on screen. Now let's go through this passage together. Before even reading the passage, you should first take a look at the blurb on top. Through it, we can know that the passage is from the perspective of Helen Keller, a famous blind and deaf American writer. Knowing this information will serve beneficial in understanding the main ideas present in the passage. In the very first paragraph, Keller is discussing 2 contrasting views of happiness and optimism, one centered around material and physical success, and the other surrounding inner values and philosophical enlightenment. On screen, I only highlighted the 2 keywords happiness and optimism on the side for visual simplicity, but your annotations should look a lot more in depth. In your annotations, you should note the contrast that Helen draws between herself and others and highlight the shift in perspective Helen had once she encountered the depth where no hope was. In the next paragraph, she elaborates on the shift in perspective through repetition. She repeats the sentence structure, once I blank, now I blank, in order to further enhance this contrast between her previous and current life. By showing this change and emphasizing how incredible it was, she sets up the rhetorical question, can anyone who has escaped such captivity be a pessimist, at the end of the paragraph that supports her notion that she is a true optimist. Here, the elaboration and the setup for the effective rhetorical question to support her main idea was the purpose of the second paragraph. In the third and fourth paragraphs, we finally get a direct answer to the importance of the contrast or shift established in the first and second paragraphs. Keller first introduced the shift from her past depressing life to her now optimistic life in lines 15 to 17, as shown by the star, and continued to elaborate on the stark change throughout the second paragraph. Then, in the fourth paragraph, by stating only by contact with evil could I have learned to feel by contrast the beauty of truth and love and goodness, Keller explicitly states the importance of this contrast from past to present.